And I was listening to a podcast the other day. They were talking about it's really think about, and I didn't have that vernacular until recently, which is a stem cell. It has infinite possibilities, right? Until it gets programmed to be a liver, a kidney, an eye. But a stem cell in itself is the concept of the energy, which can manifest in any way it can, or not manifest at all, right? That's really who we are. That's a quantum mechanics theory. Now we have a different word for that. At that time, growing up, there was no quantum mechanics for me. It was all about, how we have in Christianity here is the Bible. There are a lot of scriptures in India, tons of them. As I jokingly used to say that you got one book, we got library, right? So make a pick of which book you want. And it's not one is better than the other. It's because they're different flavors, the books, right?
Mhm.
So there's a book called Bhagavad Gita, the Gita, where supposedly this message was expounded. And when it's one of the biggest thing there is that there is no you, there is no me. It's all just one.
Folks, this week's guest is my new friend, Saket Jain, founder and CEO of Impact Wealth Builders. From mastering the game of generating money to living in a monastery with his wife, what did Saket learn from his spiritual journey to prosperity and wealth creation? You'll definitely want to tune in to hear Saket's story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Welcome back to episode 67 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I'm excited to share today's interview with my new friend, Saket Jain. I was introduced to Saket through our mutual friend, Brooke Young, and I'm grateful that Brooke connected us because it was like meeting an Indian brother from another mother. During our first chat, as we were introducing ourselves and sharing our lives, there were multiple times where we would be hearing each other's story, and it felt like I was experiencing deja vu. As a brief background, number one best-selling author, investor, syndicator, tech enthusiast, and philanthropist, Saket Jain is the founder and CEO of Impact Wealth Builders, where he is passionate about achieving financial freedom through real estate. With over 15 years of experience in real estate, Saket was a business operations leader at Airbnb headquarters. Realizing he wanted to achieve more in life, Saket went on a journey to discover the true meaning of wealth and wellness. Saket earned his MBA at Columbia Business School and achieved his bachelor in engineering at IIT in India. When he is not working, Saket loves to spend time with his wife of 19 years and two daughters. So without further ado, here's Saket. Saket Jain, welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Man, thank you, man. Thank you. It's like literally talking to you is like I'm talking to a mirror. I love this. I love any opportunity I get to talk to you.
Oh, likewise, man. It's a blessing that Brooke connected us. So I definitely want to give her a shout out. Let's just dive right in, Saket. I love to hear your origin story. I love you to share with our audience where did it all start for you and what's led to your current path that you are taking today.
Yeah, definitely. So it's definitely a long story, a 45-year long story, 46-year long story. We'll compact it in the timelines. So grew up in India. If my accent didn't give away, I've been here for a long time now. I think like 22, 24 years now. So been here for a long time. So I would say that a majority of my adult life has been in this country now. So I'm super confused with my culture. Who am I? Very different thing, right? We'll go probably have another podcast on that for sure. But really, I did everything by the book. Right? So my parents got me For those of you who have immigrant parents, I can definitely speak for that. Not saying it's only limited to that, but for immigrant parents, they want you to go to the best college. They want you to work at the best school, best employers. Right? I went to one of the top engineering college in India, IIT. For those of you who don't know them, that's like the MIT of India, with the acceptance rate of literally 0.02%. And I always say that with the humility that I was their mistake. Every institute makes a mistake. I was their mistake. So I don't know how I got in, but I got it, right? And then came to the US, was doing consulting along the way, got my MBA from Columbia. It's kind of like if you look on the paper, everything was perfect. That I would kill anyone to have my life. But what was going on with is in 2003, I married my beautiful wife. And I'm still married to the same one, which is good because I can barely keep one relationship straight. So we both were in a similar situation around 2008-ish time frame, and there's nothing to do with the financial meltdown. It's really around that time frame we were trying to figure out. We had access to capital. We were making good money. We were happy. We were living in the best neighborhoods. We didn't have kids back then. We just really didn't think that this is the life we want to live. We didn't know what that meant. We had no idea what that meant. Well, we knew that this is not what we're meant to do. And so what we did was we did something so illogical, but it was probably the best decision of our life. We sold everything we had except of one or two rental properties. We sold everything we had and we moved into a monastery in India, living with monks for about 2 years because the dichotomy we were living in, that is this what life is about? That you just make money and you just stay unhappy? We were looking at people around us and they were all doing the same thing. They were all working 20, 30, 40 hours a week, some 80, 90, 100 hours a week, and chasing something that they had no idea why they're chasing. And I'm like, you know what? If they're happy about it, that's perfect. But they were not. Nobody was happy and content. They were not having this, they were missing the whole meaning behind their life. So we thought that maybe money is not important. And we'll come back to that, which was faulty decision. That money was not important. And what we want to do is we want to contribute to somebody else's life. We want to make a difference in somebody else's life by bringing meaning to our own life. So we literally sold with the idea that we'll never come back to the material world. And when I say material world, I'm talking about making money, not necessarily having a 20,000 square feet house, but really making money. We'll never come back to it. We'll live a life of volunteer at this point. And whatever happens in life, it happens. So for those first 2 years that we lived with the monks, they were super transformational for us, man. Like we were getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning, doing our daily meditations, doing yoga, doing whatever we need to do, then going out to the villages and helping educate the kids and bringing healthcare to them and all that good stuff. We were doing that, and I think we felt we found the purpose. That this is what was missing. But towards the end of the 2 years, my wife got severely sick to the point that we needed access to one of the best healthcares. So, which we quickly realized it needs money because unfortunately, access to care sometimes require capital. So that was the root. And around the same time, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and then he wouldn't take any money from me for getting the treatment because it's like, you have a little bit of savings. If you're not making money, I can't take your money. So that's really when we realized that, look, money is very important. Now, money is not everything, but money is very important to live a life which to its fullest capacity. We could give away everything and move into the ashram, but are we really running away from something? Or are we handling life head on? That's when we realized, and around the same time, a lot happened in those 2 years. I got kidnapped at gunpoint. There was so many life transformational events that happened there that, you know what, I'm like, I have lived a full life in those 2 years. I need a break from this life, and I need to bring some more balance into my life. So then we came back, and then what happened was very interesting. We got lost in making money because making money wasn't hard. When I say not hard, we knew how to do that because we had do that in the previous chapter of our life before we went to the monastery. We just right back into it. And somewhere along the way, we lost track of it, that there's a different purpose and we need to bring balance between the two. We need to merge the two together. Until about 2016, 2017, when I got laid off. That's when it all came back because I went through severe depression. I went through severe identity crisis. My ego was bruised because, again, on paper, how can this happen to someone with my background?
Mm.
Right? It can happen to other people, but not to me. So I went into why me, all those self-deprecating thought process. But what happened one day, I woke up, and for me, there was a connection between 2008, when I sold everything and I moved to an ashram, to now. Nothing had really changed
Mm.
because we were back at the 2008 time frame where the income source was taken away from us. So the more I started marinating on that, I really quickly realized that 2008 was my decision. 2017 was somebody else's decision. That's the only distinction between the two, nothing else. Now we take everything else away, right? Of course, we had a little bit more savings at that time. We had more investments at that time. So it was not because of the money. The ego was bruised because I did not make that decision to quit. Somebody else made that decision for me. So that really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And I went into really trying to make sure that we take control of our life and we never, ever, ever, ever give control, financial control back in somebody else's life. And that's where the feeling of something is lacking came back. It's in the moments of these vulnerabilities where your true nature shows up. Either you get overexcited and happy, or you get super sad. These are reflective moments. And we were fortunate, both me and my wife were very fortunate that we figured out to use that as a reflection rather than it being a moment of disgrace for us. It started as a disgrace. It started as depression, but we quickly moved on. So along the way, then we started building our own passive wealth to make sure we have control on our finances and that we figured out a way that we could free ourselves up from this 9 to 5, 9 to 10 job, right? And the moment we did that, we just got regained our time back. And then we went back to the 2008 experience where we started a company now where our main reason for existence is to educate kids in India.
Mm.
Because as we reflected back on our experience with the monastery, when we felt most fulfilled was when we were in the villages.
Mm.
But I also know at this time we had kids now. While it's good to expose them to that, that's not the life I wanted for them. So we decided that, you know what, we're going to continue doing what we're doing because we know how to do it and we know how to do it well. But we're going to repurpose our capital and our investors' capital to try and do something different with them. So we have a goal now of teaching 100,000 kids, sponsoring 100,000 kids K through 12 education by 2030. And that's really the entire goal of whatever we do now is. So we're now in a roundabout way. It took us about 15 odd years to start back from where what was going through. But this time we know, I think we have our game plan a little bit better aligned to what we want to do. And chances of us getting lost, we may still get lost. Chances of us getting lost are very slim because we're surrounding ourselves with people who actually have a similar passion, just like yourself is
Yeah.
one I consider you as a friend now. So just like that, we're surrounding with people who are not going to let you get distracted.
Yeah.
They're gonna push you back to make sure that even if you're lost, they'll bring sense back to you. Does it make
Yeah.
sense?
It
I know I talked a
does.
lot, so I want to make sure I pause here. I can go on. I'll pause here
Yeah.
to see what your reflections on that story may be. Anything that we go deeper into some aspects.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of different rabbit holes we can go down towards Saket, but it's just, I'm smiling right now because it's like, oh my God, if I had my story but the Indian version of it, oh, here it is.
Yeah, completely, man.
Right?
Completely. I keep telling you, man. There's like two
It's
different bodies.
uncanny. It's
It is
uncanny.
uncanny.
It's
Yeah.
uncanny. But and I'm grateful that you're here right now, that we've met in this crossroad. So Saket, okay, there's a few things I want to unpack in what you just shared.
Yep.
So if we go back now, before you made the pivot of going to the monastery, I want to understand in the careers you've built and the life that you and your wife have created up until that point. It seems like everything was going smoothly, maybe on
Yeah.
the surface or on the exterior,
Mhm.
but what was it internally that made you guys look at each other and say something's off? Because it felt
Yeah.
like you guys had that moment. So what was it, a series of things that happened that gave you that aha moment and it's like, wait,
Mhm.
something's not right? Or what was that?
I may sound cocky for what I'm going to say next. Stay with me.
Yeah.
Making money was easy at that time, at least, right? Somehow I had a belief in me we had some proofs that, you know what, any problem that I encounter in the work at work, I'm going to be able to solve it. So what happened around that time was the challenge went away. So the excitement I had when I started my first job to 2008, I'm like, is that what it is? It's easy. Why do people now? It doesn't mean it's simple. It's just easy, right? Kind of like you do this, this, and that. It'll all work itself out. You may have to work a little bit hard. The mental pattern, the mental model was we were able to crack it. And
Mm.
either we had this innate ability or we nurtured it. No idea. I've never actually thought about that. But we were able to crack. I'm like, this is easy, right? If this job doesn't work, you go to another job, you pour another 50 hours into it, you're talented enough that you'll figure it out. So that can't be the reason for our existence.
Mm.
Because, I mean, going back to our Indian roots, I think we've talked about it during your show, your recording on my podcast. Each culture has its nuances, but every culture talks about one thing, which is you're born here to become better. To become better in what, though? To, at least in our culture, because I can only speak about mine, because I lived in that culture back home in India, at least, where it was all about what you do in this life is going to impact your next life or lives, not even just one life. Right? And we believe in life after death and all that good stuff. Whether it's true or not, who knows? I can only tell after I go away and then come back, maybe next life.
Yeah.
But it's really when you start thinking about that, I'm like, if that's true, what did we do in last life to basically not being able to push ourselves to do anything better in this life?
Mm.
Once you start wrestling with that, now you're asking a question that you nobody has an answer to at that point. At
Mm.
least the ones that I knew around me. There was no answer to that. So then you start going down a path of discovery saying, how would I want to make my next life better? Forget
Yeah.
about this life. It is what it is at this point. I may have control, I may not have control. But if what my mom and dad has put into my head and the society has put into my head about the Indian philosophy of life after birth, I'm like, how do I want to make my next life better? And the only thing I could think of at that point is contribution.
Mm.
Because anything I do for me, that desire, that appetite, that hunger, I cannot satisfy. I just cannot. Because today I want $10 million. Tomorrow I want $1 billion. Day after tomorrow I want $1 trillion. Because it's never going to be enough. Because as a human consciousness, we're born to expand. We're not born to contract.
Mm.
There's no end to it, right? Our desires, our wishes, our expansion has no limit. So then we're like, you know what? Why don't we channel that expansion somewhere else? Now, sad part is when we came back from India, we lost it again. But I'm so thankful that it came back. But that's really what was going on in 2008 timeframe. We're like, you know what? We need to continue to expand. And the only way to expand was a very selfish reason that we need to make more money. We want to
Mm.
be more successful. Whatever, however we looked at expansion.
Yeah.
And that shift happened internally. We didn't think work was too hard. Again, I don't want to make it sound that I just worked for 2 hours a day. No, I didn't. I was working 90 hours a week as a consultant. And you know that. But
Yeah.
as a consultant's life, there's no personal life as a
No,
consultant.
there isn't.
There's no holidays. There's no Christmas breaks. When
You're
the
on
clients come on
call. You're
you're on
basically on
call,
call. Yeah.
pretty much,
Yeah.
right? I think that's really what the life we were, but it didn't seem like it was challenging enough. It was fine.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So two things came to me as I just listened to your response, Saket. The first one, and I wholeheartedly agree with this. The first one is that I say it with my own words, which is if your belief system is once I achieve X, then I'll be happy, right?
Yeah.
In Excel, that's called a circular reference, right?
Right.
It's an error,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's 10 million, billion, trillion. It's if you feel you're going to get happiness after you achieve it, you're
Yeah.
going to be in a world of hurt because
Correct. Correct.
it's never going to be satiated because it's really the wrong equation, right?
Yeah.
And so unless you can understand what brings you joy in the present moment and start
Mhm.
feeling it, well, then you know what you're going to attract into your life rather than you feel like you're going to chase.
100%.
So
100%. But I think that's what the problem is, though. I think
yeah,
you hit the root cause for a lot of people's unhappiness is
yeah,
because they actually think something external is going to give them happiness, including me.
right.
I'm not saying I'm any
Yeah.
unique. And I'm sure you had,
We've
I'm
both been
sure,
there. We've both been there.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we're any different. I think it's just that we're paying a little bit more in, we're putting a lot more intention around. Like even
Yeah.
now, there are moments where like, I wish I had that.
Yeah.
Then you have to reground yourself that yes, but there's a cost to that. Are you willing to pay that cost?
Yeah.
Whatever that could be. It could be material thing. It could be external thing. It could be how you look. It could be how you spend, where you live,
Yeah.
what kind of house. It could be a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that once you start looking at that, if I lose 30 pounds, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's not just about money.
That's right.
It's about if this happens, I'll be happy. Now,
Then,
should you lose 30 pounds if you need to? Very different reason.
sure.
But if you're attaching your happiness to 30 pound, now you may or may not. What if you lose 29 pounds? Are you not
Yeah.
going to be happy? What if you lost 31 pounds? Are you going to be ecstatic?
Right.
Right? So those, I think that becomes very binary at that point. And that's really
Yeah.
what I think you're talking about too. Life's not binary. Life's not black and white. Life's shades of gray.
Yeah. And so this leads to the second point that came to me as I'm listening to your remarkable story, Saket. This image came to my mind, which was it felt like for you and your wife back in 2008 and then again in 2017, it's like that inner spark in you, something helped you realize, oh, my life is meant for more, but what is that more? And the thing about spark, the
Mhm.
thing about fire is you really need three components. You need a spark, you
Yeah.
need oxygen, and you need fuel for it to be
Mhm.
sustainable. Otherwise, that spark would just be put out.
Yeah.
And it felt like the fuel that sustained your life up until the point no longer served its purpose where it's no longer sustainable. You need to use a different type of fuel.
Yeah.
But what was very fascinating for me is, man, from that to Monastery, man, I would have lost that bet, buddy. It's like,
Yeah, me too.
usually when people think about, they want to change, well, let's move to a different city or, different city
Yeah.
has different like energy and personality, or let's, change career professions. But
Yeah.
that's like a really like a 180, which is very, very, very different. And so I'm curious, is the monastery as a possibility because you went there for 2 years with your wife? Like, did you guys start your spiritual journey before that decision or during? Or because that's a very
Yeah.
spiritual path alternative to take that,
It's interesting. I don't
yeah,
think I've just shared this. It's a great question. Great question. So thank you for asking that.
yeah.
I've only shared this story with my wife. I haven't really shared this part with a lot of people.
Hmm.
Is that I think I always had a spiritual inclining to the point that when I was 13 or 14, I can't remember the exact age, I went to a discourse by this great saint in India, or at least people were telling me the great saint. I have no idea. And when I went there with an open mind. I'm like, I need to grow as a good person, whatever that meant. I had no idea what that meant. And I went there, and within the first 2 minutes, they said something which, for a 14-year-old, it was a complete block for me at least. They're like, to be spiritual, you can't smoke, you can't go after girls, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that. Right? What? And they may have their reasoning. I wasn't mature enough. I'm like, then why live? And I shut that aspect down completely. Well,
Mm.
like, this doesn't make any sense to me because I don't agree with that. You need to have all my 14-year-old, 15-year-old brain, like, you need to have all the experiences. Well, this person's already married, they have kids. Now they're saying don't go after boys or girls. Like, what is that? At that point, I couldn't fathom. I'm like, I want to smoke, I want to drink, I want to do everything. Right. So of course, the hormones were driving my decisions.
Mm.
I didn't have that term vernacular at that point. So I
Mhm.
shut that part down. And then when I got married to my wife back in 2003, just before our marriage, probably about a year or two before our marriage, my wife went through a huge chaotic event in her life. And
Mm.
she found solace in the meditation. Right?
Mm.
So when we got married, she reintroduced me to the concept of meditation. And I was completely against it at that point because I had
Mm.
built this resistance. I built that wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember one day I went to this event, and I'm having chills in my spine right now just thinking about it. I went to this event. It was, by that time, Of course, my life, if I asked everyone at that time, I was a chain smoker. I was drinking every night, right? I was living the life that I thought needs to be lived. Doesn't mean
Mm,
it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong. I don't
mm.
pass judgment on that. That was a phase in my life. It was a
Yeah.
perfect phase. I had a lot of good memories, whatever is left with me, because I'm probably sure I killed a lot of gray cells. But anyways, I was going through that event. So that event happened and she's like, just come with me. I'm going to this 3-day retreat. Just come. I'm like, you know what? I don't have anything else going on. It's in Florida. The weather is nice. I'll go. I went there, and two things happened at that retreat. One was maybe few things. I don't can't remember. The first thing was my whole notion of meditation means resistance to something, resistance to your desires, resistance to your urges. Is actually not true. It's because when you become meditative, your desires disappear. That doesn't
Mm,
mean you're suppressing your desire.
mm,
I had thought it completely different. I had thought you have to first suppress your desires and then you go into meditation. Otherwise, you cannot be meditative.
oh,
And here is this person
interesting.
is telling me that once you become meditative, your desires will become immaterial. It doesn't matter. You won't even have to suppress it. It just won't be there. So from that, what happened was two things happened. One was towards the culmination of the event, there was this beautiful music playing. And I was just standing there and I was just crying,
Mm,
tears of joy and love. I don't think at that until that point I knew what love is intellectually. And of course my wife loved me, my parents loved me, my friends loved me, but I had never experienced it in my being. And that moment, I'm trying to replicate that from then. This happened in 2004, 2005. I
yeah.
don't think I've ever been able to replicate that experience again because it was so profound for me, right?
Yeah.
So that happened. We're like, ah, this is what's missing. First of all, for a logical mind, I'm not. I grew up in a society in India where, at least in my family, men don't cry. That men don't share their emotions. Men don't hug. I don't say I love you to my parents. I didn't even say that to my wife. I'm like, why do I need to tell you? You should know I love you. Period. I don't need to tell you every single morning I love you. The moment you don't think I love you, you should just leave me. Simple, right? For me, it was very clear in my head, like,
Yeah.
what society am I coming in where if
Yeah.
you don't tell me I love you every single minute of your life, you don't love me?
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in that culture, right? So I didn't have that mental model.
Right.
And now I'm experiencing this profound love getting out poured from me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want that. I really, really, really want that. So we went into a whole journey for towards meditation, towards they had different levels of programs, and there's one program which is a 7-day silence. You don't talk,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and that was it was. I think you may have heard Vipassana. It's not
Mm-hmm.
Vipassana; it's a different program, but similar kind,
Similar. Yeah.
where you're now able to quiet your brain to a level where, and that's the program where we realized, at least the program we went to, best thing they did was they took away the choice. We
Mm.
had no choice. We were told what time we're getting up during those 7 days. We were told what we're wearing. We were told which spot we're sleeping on. We were told what food are we eating. All the choices were just stripped away from us. So that was the first time we actually had a feeling of surrendering.
Mm.
That, and probably the most free I've ever felt. That, oh, I don't have to make decisions. And life can happen without decisions and without my involvement. Life can happen. It's actually happening at a wonderful level. That was an amazing experience, man. But coming back to why I was telling you the chain smoking thing, I came back from that retreat. I couldn't smoke. I threw up every time I put a cigarette in my mouth.
Wow.
Physically, I couldn't smoke.
Yeah.
That thing was completely gone. And I was smoking 4 or 5 packs a day, right? So it's not
Wow.
like
Okay. That was pretty heavy.
I was
Yeah.
going crazy. I was literally probably not doing anything good for my life.
Mm.
From that to going cold turkey after coming back from that retreat, for me, that was a proof that, look, I don't have to stop the urge to smoke. When I went to this process of 3 days of meditation, the urge went away. So then the life happens for you. You're not making these decisions. Oh, no, no, no. Ben's smoking and he's cool. I want to be like Ben. No, that urge went away. I don't want to be like Ben. Ben's Ben. I'm me. But
Mm.
even though Ben's cool, that's perfect. I need to pick great things from Ben for me. What's serving for me in my
Mm.
life. So to answer your question, I think the spiritual realization was always there growing up, but I subsided it because the Indian culture also growing up there, you're bombarded with that life is all about spirituality or religion more, not so spirituality, more religion.
Mm.
And I looked at as I rebelled, and then thank God for my wife, I found it again, but at this time in a way that I needed to find.
Yeah.
And then when all of that happened, when we were going through the 2008 decision making process, like we want that feeling.
Mm.
We want that. And where else can we get that feeling? So we did think about moving around, right? For your audience, in the last 23 or 24 years I've changed 26 addresses
Oh
in the
wow.
US. Forget about India.
Holy
So
moly.
it's not like I can't move. Uh,
Right.
I've definitely figured out a move. But what we were thinking about is if we were to surround ourselves in an environment where we get impacted the most, we can find another Ben, we can find another Brooke, we can find another Jen, but all these people have lives, right? They're distracted. What environment can we immerse ourselves in where people are all about, now they may have their deficiencies, but they're there for personal growth and contribution, period, nothing else. So growth, personal growth and contribution are the only two things they're chasing.
Uh,
But like, even if they're distracted, chances are they'll come back to the reason why they're there
yeah.
and they'll reassess their path and the other great inspirations. If there are hundreds of monks, not all of the monks are going to get lost on the same day.
Yeah.
Maybe 50%. Of course, at that point, my left brain starts working. I'm like, not all of them are going to lose their path on the same day. Some may not. Some maybe 50% probability, maybe 60% probability. I started to put some math. I'm like, you know what? It's better to be in that environment because we're going to find more souls who are trying to find their path than meeting the souls who have lost their path. That was the whole trigger point at that point. So that's when we really immersed ourselves. And I would recommend everyone to spend some time in a month. Don't sell everything and spend 2 years. That may not be for everyone. Take that time away, especially the time we're living in right now. There's so many beautiful retreat centers that are coming
Yeah.
up, and they're very comfortable now. Like we were sleeping on. I was telling somebody the other day, we were literally living in a 6 by 10 room and two beds, like me and my wife. So you could basically touch the walls if we both connected our hands. And then from there, when we came back, we found a rental apartment for like 850 square feet. Ben, kid you not, our first thing was, how are we going to live? This is too big. Of course, that changed within 1 week. It changed within 1 week. They're all
Yeah.
gone. We're like, this is humongous. How are we going to fill this space? We don't even know which room to sleep in. We're like, too
Oh, that's
much
so
all of a
funny.
sudden. And then you're like, oh, this is small. We need a bigger
Yeah.
place, right? And then we went
Yeah.
into that hole. We got lost a little bit. So I don't know if does that answer your question. I
It
hope I didn't go
does.
into a completely different story.
No, no, no. I love the richness of how you describe the details of it because it's it's funny because it's like I think this is where both you and I are very blessed to encounter is that it feels that in your situation with your wife and similar to my situation with my wife, we both embarked on our spiritual journey around the same time. It
Yeah,
didn't mean we had to necessarily grow at the same rate, but it was the fact that we both had that inner desire to grow spiritually. So in that growth journey, to be able to recognize, hey, this is what we want, because
yeah,
what I get my takeaway from what I heard from you is that decision to go to the monastery was really heart driven. It wasn't so much logic
right,
driven.
right.
You kind of did like a process elimination and like still got there,
I
but
had to.
it was yeah. I mean it's in your blood, right? But it's
Yeah,
in your DNA. But it was heart driven, and
yeah,
to do it with
definitely,
a partner that not only gets it but encourages and want to be sitting right next to you in that same boat for that journey.
definitely,
That's
100%.
that's a blessing, man. That way we both have
No,
because
I tell my
yeah,
wife that look, I could have been married to somebody else, and let's say I still had a spiritual awakening with or without that person, But to make a decision to uproot ourselves for somebody who grew up in the US, my wife, although she's Indian origin, she grew up in the US.
Oh,
For her to be able to uproot herself and say that you were right, or and it's not even I am right, it's we both came to that decision. So I think the decision was already made to move. We were trying to rationalize the decision,
mm-hmm.
right? By going through this probability analysis. I think even if the answer was it, the decision is wrong, we probably would have still done it anyways because the decision was made.
Yeah.
We're going. Now, of course, when you start talking to my mom and I start telling people, one friend who I hadn't talked to probably 20 years since
Yeah.
at that time, he called me out of a blue. He's like, dude, what's wrong in your marriage that you
Yeah.
have to take this drastic step? I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
He's like, well, people don't just go to the monastery. We call it ashram in India. They don't just
Yeah.
go to the ashram unless there's something wrong. I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And then my mom said, Saket, why are you going there? I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, you don't go there until you're 70. And it's just this conversation. When you start having this conversation, I'm like, well, if you're going there at 70, that means that place has a purpose. And you're wise enough at 70 to do that. Well, why would I go when I'm 20?
Mm.
Why would I waste 50 years of my life? Of course, that logic didn't work with her, but that's really because she's like, no, you're wrong. I'm like, it's perfectly fine. If I want to be wrong, that's okay. And thankfully, I'm the middle child, so I'm the abused child, as I say that.
Oh my goodness.
So she's like, you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. So that's fine. Go do it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, what? But the reason there was, why do we want to wait for another 50 years to do something? And the biggest flaw in that reasoning is, which I know, is you may not be alive for 50 years.
Mm.
You may not be alive tomorrow. You may not be alive next second. One of us may drop dead. We don't know that, right? So why would you want to wait for a rich experience and fulfilling experience to happen to you at 70, at 75? And who put that age? Why not 50? Why not 47? Why
Right.
70? Why 75, right? It's
Yeah.
because at that time you're thinking your responsibilities are done. Well, if responsibility is such a burden, why have kids? Why have a mortgage? Why have a house? Right? You just kind of, that whole pattern you start breaking down, you start realizing we're putting shackles on our own hands and foot to not being able to progress in life. And then at 65, 70, 75, whatever that age needs to be, well, like I've spent all my life, it was meaningless. Let me go to some place where I can find peace. You don't realize that we were all born free. It's through whatever reason, we have lost that freedom. And throughout our life, we keep chasing these shackles, not really freedom, only to realize, well, those shackles didn't give us the freedom. Now let's go chase freedom because we only have 10 more years left because we're 70 and by 80, we're going to pass away. Right? Whatever that is. I think it's just that when you start thinking about that, when you start realizing it, you're like, you know what? You're so thankful to have a partner, to your point, is that who is in the same journey. Now, doesn't mean you're taking the same train. Your partner may be taking a plane to get there, and you may be taking a bullock cart for all you know. That's okay. But the destination is the same.
Yeah.
So one person can pull the other one or push the other person forward instead of being a box full of crabs where the crabs are pulling the other person down. Like, no, you can't be spiritual because what happens to me, like I have a very good friend of mine whose wife always complains to him. He wants to be healthy, right? He wants to only eat raw food, only juices, no processed sugar, no salt,
wow.
nothing.
That's
Right?
amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing. He's an inspiration to me. I don't think I can do that yet. But we were having a conversation that is like, this man has screwed my life because I can't have fun in my life. Right? And she says it jokingly, but I know she's meaning to a certain extent, she's meaning it. But she's like, he can't even drink a beer. He can't even drink a wine. I can't take him socially because he's not going to eat food.
Yeah.
Well, like, that's one thing, but look at him. Look at him. He's at the peak of his energy.
Yeah.
He's happy. It's like one of those things where if you're on a separate path,
Yeah.
and it's not because of jealousy, it's because you want to live a certain life and the partner is not helping you push in that thing, right? That's really where when I see that having the right partner is so important. And hopefully all of your listeners have support in their lives where their partners are They may not know the destination, but they're asking the question.
Yeah.
And if you ask a question, the path will show up. I'm very confident in that.
I love
Problem is,
that.
most of us don't ask questions.
That's right. Man, I love that. And I've shared this on my show too, is that you don't have to be going to the exact same address. You just have to be going towards the same quadrant.
Yeah,
Just logistically, right? Like if,
right.
you're in North Carolina, I'm here in LA, and if I'm saying, my version of a great vacation is going to London, well, and then you want to go to somewhere in Europe, okay, well, that's going to work. But if you want to go to Hawaii and I want to go to London,
Yeah,
it's like we're not in the same
different.
quadrant. It's
Correct,
just not going to
correct,
work,
correct,
right? Like it doesn't have
correct,
to be same address, but just same quadrant. Well, even though it might get there a little slower, it's not going to create a resistance where we're just going to feel stuck being together.
correct. Completely,
And
100%.
and you touched on a word I want to expound a little bit more, which is energy. You mentioned about
Hmm.
energy. What has your relationship with the word energy evolved? Let's call it pre and post monastery.
Yeah, I think pre-monastery, I intellectual. So going back, because I don't know your audience that well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many of the audience would understand the Indian philosophy. So let's go a little bit deeper into
Yeah,
that so that
please.
we can
Yeah.
come out of that after that.
Yeah.
So Indian philosophy is all about we're living in illusion. Your body is not your body, your mind is not your mind. There's no dog, there's no cat, there's no stone. It's all an illusion, but we're all same energy, right? Everything in that body, everything that exists in the world is the same exact energy, just manifested differently. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. They were talking about it's really think about, and I didn't have that vernacular until recently, which is a stem cell. It has infinite possibilities, right? Until it gets programmed to be a liver, a kidney, an eye. But a stem cell in itself is the concept of the energy, which can manifest in any way it can, or not manifest at all, right? That's really who we are. That's a quantum mechanics theory. Now we have a different word for that. At that time, growing up, there was no quantum mechanics for me. It was all about, how we have in Christianity here is the Bible. There are a lot of scriptures in India, tons of them. As I jokingly used to say that you got one book, we got library, right? So make a pick of which book you want. And it's not one is better than the other. It's because they're different flavors, the books, right?
Mhm.
So there's a book called Bhagavad Gita, where supposedly this message was expounded. And when it's one of the biggest thing there is that there is no you, there is no me. It's all just one. So when you start thinking about that, now I intellectually knew that growing up in India.
Mhm.
So I think through my own journey in 2003 beyond, and I say that life before my wife, her name is Tejal, life before Tejal and life after Tejal. Now I don't give her all the credit in front of her, but it's really life before her and life after her.
Um,
Uh, it's really more around where those concepts I actually started to think about it. Where, you know what, I've heard this before because somebody would say something. I'm like, I've heard that before. And I'll go back to that. I would say that, this is an energy exchange. It really is an external energy exchange. It's not a physical transaction because there is nothing called physical, anyways. Everything is made out of same atoms. So there's a beautiful story in Bhagavad Gita where they say that the protagonist or the so called incarnation of the God, Krishna, opens his mouth and Krishna's mom sees the entire universe in his mouth. Now, did it really happen? I have no idea. But I think the concept, metaphorically speaking, what they're basically saying is we're made of the same thing that the universe is made out of. You are made out of the same thing as I'm made out of. Now we have our own bodily manifestation. So we think we're unique. We think we're different. We think our path is different. We think our purpose is different. We think we're born here to make an impact. I agree and disagree to that. I go back and forth on that. It's really the path is to live the best life you can. Doesn't mean it's better or worse or good. Like me and my wife were having a conversation the other day. I'm like, you know what? I had this weird realization recently that why are we stressing about life? We're here on borrowed time. Some, and not to make it morbid, but some may die tomorrow, some may die in 50 years. Eventually, we're all going to die. So when we say that I want to get my kids situated, What does that even mean,
Mm.
right? Is it just money? Is it, I want to send them to the best college, but why? And this is where you start. The only way you can answer these questions is through energy, man, right?
Mm.
So it's the exchange of the energy. The kids are born to you because there is an energy exchange that somebody, either the universe or the nature or the higher power, somebody wants you to have that energy exchange. You can make it pleasant, you can make it life fulfilling, or you can make it like living hell. That's true for people in our lives. That's true for things in our life. That's true for money in your life. It's just given to you to have an exchange with it. Eventually, this is all going to go away because not because money is going to go away or people, you're going to go away.
Mm.
Forget about everyone else. If you're going to go away eventually, why are we stressing? Why are we putting so much emphasis on our dreams, on our goals, to a point that you get depressed? Dreams and goals are great. Don't get me wrong. You need to have a trajectory of your life. The challenge is, how do you feel if you don't achieve it? If you achieve it, we all know we're going to be happy, at least momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if you don't achieve it? Because you should not embark your path. Nothing in this world is guaranteed, right? So the energy transaction may work in your favor or not. If you're engaging in that transaction with a guarantee that it's going to work in your favor, now you're playing with fire because nobody gave you that guarantee. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to make $1 million, if you want to become a coach, if you want to have a business, great, all of that's a great thing. But what happens if it's not doesn't work in your favor? Are you able to deal with that concept of energy that, you know what, that energy was meant to be with me for a certain time. It was great when we had this. Now I gotta have another exchange. This feeling is also an energy. So everything to
Yeah.
me is, dude, most people have not seen that side of mine because I don't usually expose that side, right? Because
Yeah.
these are usually meant for very closed people, closed group of
Yeah.
people that we have this conversation. So thank you
Yeah.
for your questions are interesting. Is bringing out stuff that is there,
Yeah.
but I've not brought to the surface for others. So great question though. Hopefully that answers your
No,
question again.
it does. It does. Man, I feel like we could probably go on for another 3 hours. And
We can.
which
I'm
is
pretty sure
telling
we
me
can.
it's probably I'll have to invite you back on our show for a part two. But no, I love this exchange. I love your philosophy of energy. Like I did not know the Indian culture had this philosophy. I wish I had studied it beforehand because I mean, dude, it took me like almost 40 plus years to
Yeah,
understand and have a newfound relationship with the word energy like I do today. And it's just amazing to hear. And you get to learn from these different perspectives when you hear people's story. And that's why
definitely,
I'm
man.
very grateful that you're sharing this, Saket,
Definitely.
because I mean I think I shared this on your on the end of your show the other day, which is just to have our society and culture and world for the same breadth of sentence you're saying and value logic and IQ and knowledge is power, that in the same conversation, in the same sentence, you can also share the importance of energy and
Yeah,
intuition and feeling. The world will be a much better place when they can understand that it really goes hand in hand. Heart and
100%.
mind are hand in hand.
100%.
So for you to share this, I think it's just again giving a glimpse of what is possible to ask different questions. And I can already feel
Appreciate it,
it.
man.
So yeah,
No,
man.
thank you. Thank you again for asking that question. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So
I mean, I haven't had this great of a conversation in a long time. This is good.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so Saket, let's switch pace a little bit. I love
Mhm.
to hear because you have your own podcast called Migrate to
Yeah,
Wealth.
yeah,
Tell me a little bit of what inspired you to start this podcast. And I believe you started in
yeah.
2022, right? So last year.
2022, last year.
Yes.
Last year, October. Yeah.
So what is it about? What inspired you to do this
Let's
podcast?
first go through the inspiration, then we'll go to what's it about because the
Sure.
inspiration story will basically give it all away, anyways.
Okay.
So, and I wasn't anyone unique during COVID timeframe. A lot of people have lost a lot of people. We just had a very tough time, whether it's fair or not, different conversation, different discussion, why it happened, like all of that. But regardless, the collateral damage is that every one of us have suffered some loss in our life. For
Mm,
me, it was a lot of family members back home in India. We didn't lose anybody here. I lost about five members in my family, my uncles, my sister, and my mom in that order.
Oh
And my
my
sister,
God.
who was 2 years older than me. And right after that, I kind of knew because I lost my dad in 2015 to cancer, but I knew my mom wouldn't be able to take that. So I kind
Oh,
of knew that she's on borrowed time at that point. She didn't pass away because of COVID. She, I believe, passed away because of depression, because of the heartbreak, right? Basically.
yeah.
So as I was trying to come to terms with that loss, I'm like, I don't know how much time I have because I'm sure my sister had planned her entire life. She was only 2 years older at that time. She was about 45 years old. So I'm like, I'm pretty sure she has a life plan. And she knew, and her daughter was my niece, was about 17 at that time. So I'm sure she thought that, you know what, after she turns 18, she's going to go to college and I have a lot more time back and all that good stuff. She had her life plan, whatever her life was. I'm like, I don't know because this could happen to me. Not because of sickness, not because I may run out of my time. So of course the right next question to you to that came. I'm like, what if my daughters need me? I'm like, look, I cannot guarantee that I'll be there physically for my daughters, but can I be there in any other form that they can access me if they needed me, and if they thought I had something to add to their life, can I do that? That was the genesis of the podcast, where I want to
Mm,
leave me behind,
yeah.
right? That whatever that means. I'm not saying I'm the most intelligent person or not. I'm like, this is me. Like it or not, you may hate your dad, you may like your dad, but this is who your dad was if I'm
Mm,
not around. If I'm around, hopefully they can still enjoy the podcast, but I'll be there and hopefully I'll be a little bit more wiser as they grow older.
yeah.
So, of course, my philosophies may change, my frameworks may change, my perspective of how I look at life will change. So, the genesis was, what can I leave behind for them?
Mm,
So, what do I want to leave behind? I could be somebody who's just monologuing to them, saying that, hey, their name is Ariana, Alina, don't do this, don't marry that, don't do this in life, don't. But then I'm just doing the same thing as the 14-year-old me felt,
mm,
which is, well, this is all about restriction. Why am I going to listen to this person? Because they're telling me what not to do. So as I started reflecting on that, I'm like, there's one thing they'll want to do if I'm not around, which is for sure, which is to make money. Because not because it's right or wrong, it's because that's where the society is going to push them. So if I reflect on my journey, how can I make that journey easy for them? So that was the first thing. I'm like, you know what? I need to be able to help them look at money differently, look
mm,
at money making differently. That you don't have to work hard. It's a cliched statement, you have to work smart, but it's really more about you have to make your money work for you. And you know that because with your investment background, you can quadruple your money much faster, maybe 10x your money much faster than just working for it. Nobody's gotten wealthy by working for money. You need to make the money work for you, right? So that's I'm like, okay, that's going to be the chapter one for the podcast because selfishly, if I'm not around, like that's going to get them hooked enough
mm,
to continue listening, which is
yeah.
perfect. And I think now we're coming to the chapter that we've gotten enough left brain for them to say, you know what, he's interviewed over 120 people, all saying the same thing. So forget about my dad. He may be dumb, but 120 people that he interviewed, they're all saying the same thing. There may be something in it.
Mm,
So the goal was, you know what, okay, to change their mind.
yeah.
And hopefully through these episodes, I'm able to do that. I mean, only
Yeah.
time will tell. And hopefully they never have to use it. Hopefully they'll
Yeah.
always have me, but there's no guarantees.
Yeah.
Like, okay, next chapter was going to be, okay, once they have money and they have time, and I can only reflect on my experience, there's an emptiness comes when you've figured money out. When you've figured out the biggest challenge that the society's challenge is most important, you feel like there's something missing. So they're going to ask the questions at that.
Mm,
And at that point, I got to be able to help them of how they think about things. So the mindset. Now, once they have the right mindset, now they have that capital. The next thing is going to be, I'm not in the perfect health. So health's going to get tagged on. Along the way, they're going to get relationship troubles
yeah.
because their heart's going to get broken. They're going to get married. They're going to have kids. They're going to have friends, whoever, whatever's going to happen.
Mm,
And if nothing happens, that's fine too. But they're going to be interacting with people. And those relationships have to be approached in a certain way that is not transactional, it's fulfilling. Doesn't mean you judge people, but you have to be like us moving to the monastery. We had to surround ourselves with different ecosystem.
Yeah.
Basically immerse to remove everything that we didn't want, to then pick and choose what we wanted. But we had to go
Yeah.
through that process, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be the health. I'm like, okay, now you got the mind, you got the money, you got the health, you got the relationship. They're still not going to get fulfilled
Mm.
because there's something's going to be missing from that life still. So what's that other element? And that's where the contribution, the impact would come in.
Yeah.
Where they're going to come through all of this journey saying that, well, I'm thinking right, I'm making money, I'm fully healthy, and I have relationships are great. But what's the purpose of my life?
Mm.
So then we're going to bring the impact. Now it's probably a long journey for the podcast to
Yeah. Yeah.
come to a point where it'll cover all of these. But that was really the genesis. I'm like, okay, I can't, there's too many things we're covering in this podcast. So what are we going to call it?
All right.
So the thought that came to my head at that time was, look, our definition of wealth changes as we move towards different stages of life. So why don't we just call it migration to wealth? And then of course we chopped it all around what made easier for to roll off of my tongue, of my
Right.
immigrant tongue. I'm like, I gotta have very few syllables and very few smart words so I
Yeah.
can say it.
Yeah.
And that's when we picked up the word migrate to wealth, where you're always migrating. You'll never get there because there is
Mm.
no there unless
Mm.
you turn inwards. And then you found everything. Then you realize you don't need to migrate anywhere. So that
Mm.
was the whole genesis of podcast. That's why I got started.
Yeah.
That's why it's very, very left brain focused right now.
Yeah.
For those of you listeners who actually may want to listen to that, you're going to
Yeah.
realize it's very left brain centric.
Yeah.
It's because the problem we were trying to find is unless people's money problems are solved, they're going to keep coming up with excuses why nothing else is going to be in balance.
Yeah.
Let's solve money. Easy.
Yeah.
Not easy, but it's possible to solve money. And let's
And
figure it out. Let's do it. Then let's shift on the other elements because I ran away from money,
mm.
and that's not the right approach. We need to have money, but not be lost in it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Man, I'm getting chills off on my spine because what I heard from you, well, there's two things. One is I want to give credit where credit's due, which is that I think in a very, very similar vein, why you started your podcast and why I started my podcast had very similar triggering events that sparked it, which was with the passings of your loved ones during the pandemic. My uncle passed away, and I was MC for the funeral. And I
Right.
came back. I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I'm in the
Yeah.
same place I was 7, 8 years ago. Like,
Right.
wait, this doesn't make sense. And then it made me realize that, wait, if I can speak to my younger self in a way where when I felt those times that I was lost or I feel stuck or the programming I'm currently in is no longer serving my soul,
Yeah.
then how do I get out of it and install a new set of program?
Correct.
Well, that's what inspired my show as well. Like I think our evolution of our shows is getting to the same destination,
Same thing, man. I
but it's
keep telling
really
you, man. It's
just,
like talking to
yeah,
me in a mirror in a different
yeah.
language. That's it.
Yeah. So the first one is just giving credit to our loved ones because, in
Definitely.
tying with what you shared about energy, which I wholeheartedly agree, it's like that's the legacy and energy that was really transferred for us that we want to be able to amplify.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really the spark of both of our respective podcasts. And so I just wanted to
Completely.
acknowledge
Completely.
that.
No, thank you for doing that because I think that's it is. I can't thank those while they were very heartbreaking, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure the loss that my sister's family faced, I cannot even
Yeah.
fathom.
Yeah.
But the outcome of that for me was it shifted my life in a very positive direction. Same's true for you
Yeah.
with your uncle's passing, right? I think these
Yeah.
are these are the people they came there for a purpose for you.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that's the only purpose they came in life,
Right.
but for you, their purpose was this,
Yeah.
and you got to give them the credit.
100%. 100%. And the second thing I'll just say is with the what you shared about what your podcast is about, and in a very similar vein, like, that's one of the reasons why I was very excited to bring you onto my show is because, my whole three verticals is health, wealth, and higher self. It's all
Mm,
interconnected. And
yeah,
to the extent that I rotate guests that can speak about health, about wealth, and higher self. And that's why it's like, oh, but the underlying glue, so to speak, in that foundation is there is a spiritual sense of that
Right.
energy. And when you understand and have a very healthy relationship with that word, it opens up just a different world in how you operate. And it
It
actually
does.
makes your life easier. But you're not doing it because you're doing it for a shortcut. You're doing it because, wow, like I would love to go 3 times as far with 1/3 the effort. But how do I do that? You
Right.
got to think three-dimensionally. You can't just be
Definitely.
in 2D.
Definitely.
So,
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that, right? I think the
yeah.
unfortunate challenge happens is, and one of my mentors told me this, I'll just repeat it, not verbatim, but my understanding of that is like, we're all after freedom, all of
Mm,
us. We think money is going to give us freedom. We think is because we think money will give you comfort, for sure. For sure, it'll give you comfort and it'll give access to things that you don't have. Now, people jokingly say that I would rather be happy, rich, unhappy, rich, because at least I can throw money at it, right? So it's perfect. I can understand where they're coming from. But having access to money doesn't mean you have access to freedom, right? But if
mm,
you make freedom as your core, like for example, somebody was telling me, why don't you just buy a business or start a franchise or whatever? I'm like, have you looked at my life? I've moved 25 times. Do you really think I'm built for a brick and mortar business? I'm
mm,
not built for that.
mm.
So why am I going to tie myself with a brick
Yeah.
and now I may never move again. I may never. But looking at my track record, I can't say that for sure I'll never move again
Yeah.
because something in my life may happen. Like my wife is doing a Ayurveda program right now, the Eastern medicine program, and she was talking to me, and she's like, and she had the program is in Asheville, North Carolina, and we are in Apex, North Carolina. Well, like she's like, should we just move? I'm like, you know me, I have no issues packing the bags and moving wherever you want me to be because I'm all for it. Because you shouldn't do anything in life because you've built a structure which is rooted in ground. Right?
Mm,
If you want to do something, you should be able to do something, and it
yeah.
shouldn't feel like you're making a compromise.
Yeah.
Anything in life,
Yeah.
even if you're raising kids, you should not be like she should not be able to do. She should be able to do Ayurveda with or without kids, if that's what her life path is.
Mm,
And we'll have to figure it out what to work with the kids, how to make it balance it out. The
yeah.
kids has to also understand because what's going to happen is if you don't do that, you're going to feel a regret
Mm,
and you're going to blame somebody in your life.
mm,
It could be a $5 million house you bought because you can't get out of it because you can't move, or it could be the kids that you'll pass the blame to. That it's not them; it's you can't live with other kids. The kids will be fine.
right.
Now it'll be hard, but you as a parent may not be able to. You feel guilty,
Yeah.
so it's really your fault. You've built those shackles and structures, so you're not really free. So you have to ask yourself the question: what is freedom
Right.
to you as an individual, right? And for me, it's really that's why I quit my corporate job. I'm like, it's a shackle, right? I figured out how to get out in 5 years or so. We all have built our structures, our way of freedom. I'm like, I need that freedom. Even if I make less money or more money, it doesn't matter. I don't need that in my life
Mm,
because it's becoming a shackle. I get
yeah.
up in the morning, I have to work. I was looking forward to this podcast for the last 3 days because I knew we were going to record on
Yeah.
Monday, but we talk for like 3 hours, so we couldn't get to record. So I'm like, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
That's the excitement I want in life. I want to surround myself with people who I love, who I respect, who I can learn from, who I can add value to. Not because I have to, is because I get to.
Yeah.
Right? And that brings power to me, and
Yeah.
that's gonna make me even more of Ben's in my life. Hopefully,
Mm.
there's only I don't think there's a lot of bands in life, but at least maybe we'll find it. We can strive for it, right?
It's out there. It's out there. The universe is
We'll
big.
see, man. We'll see. Maybe on a different planet.
Oh man. Okay, so in wrapping up, Saket, I have two more questions for you. This is a question I ask all of my guests, which is if the time machine was real, like Back to the Future, and the DeLorean was real, if you can travel back in time, and I'll let you decide which year, what age you want to travel back to, and you're able to share one insight or something to your younger self, how far back would you go and what would you share with your younger self?
Um, I'll actually go back to the 14-year-old guy that story was telling you
Mm.
that you have to question what they're saying, but don't discount what they're saying because of the mental model you have. Right? So, for example,
Mm.
my spiritual journey could have now I don't know. I don't live in what ifs. I live in it happened for a reason, right?
Yeah.
But if I had a choice to go back,
Yeah.
that's the person I would say is that listen to that person saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you want to go through a spiritual path, listen to them, but talk to 10 more people, talk to 10 more modalities.
Yeah.
Because just because one person is saying that does not mean it's true. Or challenge yourself is why do you think you don't want to break out of that? Is that a desire? Is that a social upbringing? Is that what exactly? Now, for a 14-year-old, it's very hard, right?
Mm.
It's very hard to say that, well, I'm seeing everyone else doing it. Why can't I do it? That's where we're, so a little bit of tangent, but we'll come back to it, is my wife and I are talking about that how do we want to raise our kids, right? Do we want to, there's a very traditional path where you send them to the best private schools or go send them to the best colleges, Ivy Leagues, and whatever. That's one path. The other path is how can we bring them to where we are today now?
Mm.
Because it's going to take them a decade to get there, anyways.
Yeah.
But is there a way? Is there a way? And I don't have the answer yet. Is there a way to bring them these philosophies
Yeah.
as a tool that when they are in that 14-year-old self, when they're asked, when they're attending this discourse where somebody says, you have to stop doing everything that everyone else tells you, they're questioning it in a constructive manner. Because at that time, you may not be ready to take a pause because you're lost. Every
Mm.
14-year-old is lost, right? But what can you do now to then push that to that point where you're enabling them to make that choice, you're enabling them to make that decision to make sure they can reflect back on their years of learning on how to do that. But do it in a way that they don't run away from it. Like for me, growing up in India, I was being told about that every single time. So I was running away from it. But do you have to? You don't
Right.
have to. Right.
Right.
So we're toying with that idea. But going back, that was a pivotal moment for me when I look back
Yeah.
that, oh, you know what, if I actually did something different at that time, my spiritual growth would have been accelerated. Could I have? I have no idea.
Mm.
Maybe I needed to go through this process. Maybe I need to change smoke. Maybe I need to have this major event where I quit smoking
Mm.
without even trying, that it made me commit to that path. Right? I don't know what that
Yeah.
would look like.
Yeah.
But if I were to go back, I would say that I want that experience sooner in my life, not
Mm.
later.
I love it. I felt it. So, Saket, last question is where can our listeners find you?
Well, you can find me everywhere, but I'll actually do this.
Yeah.
I'll give you a list of my cell phone number. I would love for them to just text me because my belief is that just the energy exchange we had,
Yeah.
uh, I think there's a lot of people who are a little lost, right? When I say lost for good or for bad, being lost is actually great. That means you're looking for a door, right? But if you're lost, that means you're looking for a solution, looking for an answer, right? And if I can help them spark an inspiration in their life, you don't have to wait to connect with me. I'll give you all of those as well. But I'll give the cell phone number. Just text me. I don't outsource it. I check all my messages. My team's not getting involved in that, all that stuff. So it's 703-380-2020. Just text me and let me know. But only thing I want you to do is I want you to give this man's show a 5-star rating. That's the only thing I ask, right? So you send me a screenshot of the 5-star rating and send me a text. We will set up a time to have a detailed conversation of what's going in your life and how I may be able to help you unpack that a little bit better if I can. But of course, you don't have to. That's just an offer. I felt like saying it. So I thought I'll
Wow.
just, why hold it back? But they can find me on multiple platforms on all the social media. My handles are the Saket Jain. I hate the word "the" behind my name, but that's the only handle I could find.
Okay.
Saket was taken, Saket Jain was taken. I'm like, I'll just add "the" in the beginning. I'll make it easy.
Yeah.
I'm a lazy guy,
Yeah.
right? So I'm on LinkedIn, most active on LinkedIn and Facebook, but you
Yeah.
can find me everywhere there. We have our website, my podcast, Migrate to Wealth. I would love for listeners to come in and tune in there and let us know how we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And for someone who is actually just looking to make money right now, because they're at that stage in life, and there's nothing wrong in that. Don't let anyone tell you that making money is bad. You can actually come on to our brand, which is heavily focused on just making money.
Yeah.
We'll partner with you, you'll partner with us, and we'll help you grow your wealth. But
Yeah.
we're not going to talk about this stuff that we just covered in the podcast, because if you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it, period. I understand everyone's at that stage in their 14-year-old in their life. There's that 14-year-old Saket in everyone's life.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're not tipping the scale,
Yeah.
that we create an aversion towards it, and that's called impact wealth builders. So the
Mm.
best way, of course, is to reach me on my cell, because that's going to be the most responsive way. But there are other modalities as well, and feel free to reach whichever way you can. Everywhere you go, we'll have a way to reach back to me. So
Yeah.
I'll get information if you need to get in touch with me.
Saket, I'm speechless because that's a very, very generous offer you shared with our audience, and I felt the love behind that. And so I just want to acknowledge you. Thank you so much for
Of
I
course.
had no idea, but
I
I
had no
felt
idea either,
it.
man. I had no
I
idea either, but that felt right.
I felt that. I am grateful for you, for your time. And like I said, we're gonna have to bring you back on for part two because I just feel like we just scratched the iceberg of all the things that we can share and just give. What I appreciate about you is just you clearly, just your way of being, your energy is you're coming from a center place of how do I serve? How do I give? And leading that from it. And that's what I feel why we resonate. What we
Thank you for
do.
saying the words, man. I had a lot of fun on the podcast. I love it. Didn't feel like we were talking for over an hour.
Yeah.
This is when you know it's for good. The energy
Yeah.
exchange is beautiful. I feel the love. I feel the appreciation. So thank you again for bringing me on the show.
Yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully this conversation can impact one life.
Yeah.
And if we can, that means we have served our purpose.
That's right. That's right. And for our listeners, guys, I've just interviewed my show on Migrate to Wealth. I really recommend you guys checking it out. People know that my previous background was in real estate. And so if you are inspired by Saket's energy, by his wisdom, but just also his way of being, please go check out his show. I wholeheartedly vouch for it. And so, with that said, Saket, thank you so much for your time today. I know this is just the beginning of many
It
beautiful
is.
possibilities. And so, just thank you from my heart.
Thank you, Ben. And thank you for doing all you do, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Man, I'm really grateful to have Saket join our show today. I appreciate the nuggets of wisdom and stories he shared. There's two quotes that I feel best highlights and summarizes today's interview. The first one, there is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. This quote was by Nelson Mandela. The second quote, silence and meditation are the twin aids to peace, power, and prosperity. This quote was by Mahavatar Babaji. If you feel moved by Saket's story and resonate with his energy, I encourage you to reach out to him. Having been on his show and also being a subscriber to his podcast, I encourage you to check out and subscribe to Saket's podcast, Migrate to Wealth. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.